Alright guys, I'm here with some more modern action, and today I'm going to be playing some Crystal Brands, and I played this deck a little bit in the past. I'm not sure how much I wrote about this specific version. This is a version I saw on Magic Online that was originally designed by Stanislav Sivka, and he's been doing a lot of good work with combo decks in Eternal formats, so he had some really cool like Omnitel ideas for Legacy. He had this deck, and just a bunch of other stuff, so if you ever see a deck that looks pretty strange, Magic screen name is Ob, that's him, and he does a lot of cool work. I'm a big fan. So you see a lot of lists that have like Goryo's Vengeance and Through the Breach, and those versions are fine. Through the Breach is kind of nice because it gives you a way to do things that aren't reliant on the graveyard, whereas this deck is just all in on the graveyard, so I could theoretically see running into some problems there, but ultimately this deck is much more powerful. You have things like Glimpse the Unthinkable that it's kind of weird. It's like, okay, you mill yourself for 10, it doesn't seem like it's really that big of a deal, but it gives you another way to find Gristlebrand, and also if it puts a Goryo's Vengeance in the graveyard, then you have Snapcaster Mage. So Glimpse kind of facilitates like both those plans, and it helps you, it doesn't tutor for your combo pieces, but it's like a really big impulse, like a Limdol's Vault kind of thing. So a lot of the times with this deck, since you only have 4 Goryo's Vengeance and 4 Gristlebrand, there are a lot of games where you see a ton of cards, but you don't actually find the thing you need. So like if the 4 Gristlebrands are just like chilling on the bottom of the deck the entire match, like there's basically nothing you can do. You know, it's like really difficult to win if you don't find a Gristlebrand. But like I said, I think this deck does a very good job of seeing a ton of cards and just like getting your percentages in good. So other than that, there are some Unburial Rites, which is like another cool thing that Glimpse does, and it kind of strains the mana base a little bit, but I think it's workable, and we'll get to that in a second. But ultimately, the goal is to just like glimpse yourself, or use things like Faithless Looting and Thought Scour to put a bunch of cards in your graveyard, and use Goryo's Vengeance on Gristlebrand. At that point, you don't kill them immediately. This is not Fury of the Horde, but you have Soul Spike to either clear things off the board, gain you some more life, so that you actually have a buffer for next turn, so you get to untap and like do it again, basically, and then that should finish them off. And I like the Soul Spikes just because in the meantime they're actually pretty reasonable, just because you're going to end up with a bunch of probably dead cards in your hand. Like sometimes Inquisition is a little too slow, or they're Hellbent, or whatever, you just draw it a little too late. Redundant copies of Glimpse after you've glimpsed yourself the first time, and like you have your combo pieces, you just need some time. Things like Soul Spike are actually good, whereas Fury of the Horde just kind of sits there. So it's also a little bit better because I have more black cards than red cards, and Soul Spike is just fine on its own. It's certainly not good. It is not a card that you would play in a normal deck, but it is better as a whole in the deck than it is than Fury of the Horde. So there are also some games where like maybe you get to Gristlebrand them once, and then you kind of have to nickel and dime them out with Snapcasters and Lightning Bolts, and that's perfectly fine too, and Soul Spike helps facilitate that. But I have Inquisitions over Thoughtseizes just because this deck is already paying a reasonable amount of life from its lands and through Gristlebrand, so you kind of want all the life you have. In Inquisition, you don't mind drawing against beatdown decks, like something like Affinity, where you play a couple of Thoughtseizes, that starts to add up, whereas you Inquisition them a few times, and Inquisition can basically take everything that they have except for like maybe a Thoughtcast. But you're not really too concerned about Thoughtcast anyway. You're concerned with like the early game stuff that's going to put pressure on you. The one concern is Birthing Pod, because that card is a card that costs 4, and Inquisition can't touch it. But this deck is generally favored against pod decks anyway, just because of how slow they are. And then the last piece of the puzzle is the old Treasure Cruise, and I've been brewing a lot with this card, and it's pretty interesting. Just like it changes a lot of the ways that you'd want to build your deck in Modern. So I'm playing 4 of this, and it combos particularly well with Glimpse the Unthinkable. You just put a bunch of cards in your graveyard, and suddenly you have an Ancestral Recall, and then maybe that finds you a Looting, that finds you a Gristlebrand, and so on and so forth. And my hope is that this deck just has enough velocity, and that it's looking at enough cards that eventually you just find what you need. So I have Lightning Bolt as my removal spell, which, you know, kind of teams up with Soul Spike to like burn them out. And once you Curse of Brand them once, lets you get a little bit aggressive with Snapcaster Mage against control decks. And I mean, it's pretty much like one of the most efficient removal spells. You could have things like Slaughter Pack go for the throat. Even Disfigure is like actually pretty good right now. But I think Lightning Bolt goes with the overall plan of the deck better than anything else. The only downside is that it's not a black card for Soul Spike, but I don't think that's really a big deal because we have enough. Well, I don't want to say we have enough black cards. You know, it's like if we could have more, we would obviously have more. But I think Lightning Bolt, even though it is red, outweighs a lot of the black cards that don't really do what you want them to do. Like Lightning Bolt going to the face is actually pretty important. So that's basically the main deck for the mana base. We have Dark Shores, Blackleaf Cliffs. Deck is ultimately a Grixis deck, so those are some of the best lands, especially since you don't have much to do on turn 4. Like you very much just want to have untapped lands turns 1, 2, and 3, so the Scars lands are really good for that. The only problem is when you're trying to flash back on Burial Rites on turn 4. And for that, I have a couple Gemstone Mines, and again, this deck is pretty fast, so it's like if your lands are running out of counters, and eventually, I'm gonna pause. All right, I think this dog has calmed down, but yeah, Gemstone Mine is like the best turn 4 land, and you're trying to kill them pretty quickly, so you don't really mind if your lands are dying as long as they're not dealing you damage. You know, this could be something like Mana Confluence or City of Brass, but again, you are paying a decent amount of life, so you need to be careful with that. And then we have a fetch dual mana base on top of that. Polluted Delta helps out a lot because now you have a thing that can fetch a basic swamp, and I just have these snow-covered lands because they look a little bit prettier than the other lands that were on this account. So now we have Basic Island, Basic Swamp, whereas before it was Basic Island, Basic Mountain, which was not as good because you're trying to cast Glimpse. So Basic Mountain wasn't very good. But now, you know, we have Scalding Tarns. Could be any blue fetch land, really, as long as it fetches this Blood Crypt here. And other than that, like, you want to fetch Hollowed Fountain and like, Water Grave Steam Vents. So I guess, yeah, like Tarn is... Yeah, Tarn's the only thing that can fetch Blood Crypt. So Tarn is probably the right one, but the Blood Crypt might not even have to be in the deck. Because you don't want to draw a bunch of like straight black and red sources, but I think the Blood Crypt is a nice safety net for if you draw the island or if you need to fetch island for whatever reason, so I have that still. But that could potentially go. And then for the sideboard here, this is kind of pretty similar to what I've been doing with these decks, is you want some Pyroclasms, you want some things to fight things like Cage, so you have Ancient Grudge, Abrupt Decay. I have a Breeding Pool to go with the Abrupt Decays, maybe also the Ancient Grudges. It would be nice if there was a way to not have to splash the 5th color in the sideboard, and maybe this is just a holdover from when I had Deathrite Shaman in the deck, so like the mana was a lot easier to make all 5 colors, but Abrupt Decay handles a lot of problems pretty well, and it's pretty easy to just sideboard this card in kind of in the dark and not really know what they're doing. It's like you could side in Ancient Grudge expecting something like Gravedigger's Cage, and then they just play Rest in Peace, and you're like, okay. So Decay is a nice little catch-all. Ancient Grudge also combos pretty well with Glimpse the Unthinkable. Pyroclasm is for little creature decks that might just try and swarm you before you actually get to combo off, and this buys you a bunch of time. So Affinity is like the main target with these Pyroclasms, but there are a bunch of decks out there where Pyroclasm is pretty good too. And then have 4 Thoughtseizes for other combo decks. Maybe 4 is not the right number just because I have 4 Inquisitions made already, and I'm a pretty fast combo deck, and I also have these negates. So maybe I have a little too much like kind of mirror match hate, you know, like other combo deck hate. So I could see like 1 or 2 of these going. Negates are a nice little catch-all where sometimes, you know, they draw the card that they need. You know, they might have a Deceiver Exarch in play, you've Thoughtseize their hand, you have another backup Thoughtseize, but then they just draw Splinter Twin and kill you. And in that sense, having some counterspells to complement your discard is a nice way to go. So I like having some of that stuff. And these are like a lot of generic answer cards, you know. There's nothing in here that's really specifically for anything. It's just this deck doesn't necessarily have specific problems. It's just like, there's like graveyard hate, and that's a wide variety of things. Yeah, it could be like Scavenging Ooze to Cage to Rest in Peace to Nile Spellbomb to whatever, and things like Decay help in that regard. There are a bunch of different combo decks. You have Thoughtseize. There are a bunch of different like little weenie creature decks that are kind of fast. You have Pyroclasm, so on and so forth. So right now I'm not really trying to identify any particular threats. This is my first few matches playing with the deck, so we'll see how that goes. But like I said, I've played with this shell minus Treasure Cruise, and I think Cruise makes it better. I'm not sure if I have to change my deck since I have Treasure Cruise now. Like I did slightly, I changed Serum Visions to Thought Scour, but maybe the fact that Cruise exists means that this shell can be entirely different also. So we'll see. I haven't really identified anything specific. This is just a general rough first draft of the deck. So we'll see how it goes.